If the individual is sick, why treat the body alone? I have come that they might have life, and that they might have it more abundantly. John 10:10. There are no conditions in the divine creation of man. Conditions are brought about by the human mind that has nothing to do with the creation of man. A very profound statement. Behind the mind of man is creation of man. It is beyond man's mind to comprehend. Nevertheless, he can become aware of that same creative power within himself, in which he creates for himself. And with his ignorance, naturally he creates the error which affects his mind and body, his circumstances. And it is a law that one requires to understand, whereby man understands his own mind, discerns his own thoughts, watches his reactions to things external to himself, and is not caught up in these reactions. And when this is understood, there is a sense of freedom, because man is not caught up in the relative which itself is but effects. Any condition that exists in the body is an effect. An effect through some means whatsoever, whether it is the effect of a reaction to stimulus external to himself, or emotions that rise up within him. All these things have an effect upon his mind and body. When we create conditions, we begin to struggle with them. This is where we fail to see our own creation, thereby intensifying the error. Unless we understand and see our own creation, then we struggle with the effect. And naturally, we intensify the error. You do not struggle when you are free. You only struggle when you are imprisoned. The way to freedom is to discern the cause. You struggle with thoughts that enter the mind when you wish to be quiet. These thoughts you think are foreign to your nature, so you try to banish them. But instead of getting rid of them, they worry you further because you struggle with them. It is the struggling with a particular trouble is the cause of its intensity. You give it a power that it doesn't really possess. I told you before, the other night, that when you think and you create a thought, you set in motion certain conditions. As you know that you are all electrical, every individual and everything you see is atomic. And the basis of the atomic structure of the universe is electromagnetic. It has its movement in ether. Ether is the basis of the substance of all forms that you see, and all forms exist in the ether. It's the conductor of all energy, the conductor of all forces, which are here and there, transforming the atomic structure, creating it, disintegrating it, and annihilating it. These forces are no more than thought itself, being electromagnetic, has its power of affecting the ether, charging these small particles of ether which is beyond the atom. But I call them etherons, So the etherons are created and whipped into action, and they are carried through by the ether, which interpenetrates the atomic structure of the body and enters into the very walls of the atomic structure of your body, causing a disturbance there. Now, if you realize that, you will see what you're doing. But if you don't realize that and you struggle with your trouble, you further intensify it by your own ignorance. It is necessary to become aware of the movements of the mind without struggle. Then they will dissolve away. If you are aggressive, quarrelsome, nagging all day long, if you are jealous, envious, selfish, egotistical, etc., etc., you will see that these are false movements in which you are caught up. Thus you mar your own body and soul. You are caught up in these things because they are not according to the divine creation. If you knew completely that it was wholeness that created you, and that wholeness is within yourself, it cannot be otherwise, because wholeness cannot be divided into parts. It's indivisible. And it is this indivisible whole that is behind you and is the creativeness within you. If you realize that, then you will no longer be jealous, envious, selfish, egotistical, or any of these things that mar your mind and body. There is a quiet confidence, a supreme understanding that nothing can change or move. There is a faith that is beyond the ordinary faith that you hear about, a faith knowing, not a faith, as it were, where there is fear attached to it, because I have told you so often that fear and faith is the same thing. What you think in fear and you think in faith, you equally produce. So if you fear a thing, you create the idea of what you fear, therefore you intensify the trouble. Is that not so? For the simple reason you create in the ether, interpenetrating the body, not only that, but also in your environment and beyond, you create these disturbances because of your fear. Real faith is a different thing altogether. But the ordinary faith, there is always the combination of the two, fear and faith. And here is what you do. You have a thought in fear. You superimpose it by faith. Then you superimpose the thought of faith by fear, and then you superimpose it again with faith, again with fear, again with faith. And you are continually superimposing these electromagnetic charges which you express in your body, and you have what we call a conflict. That conflict is always in your mind, and you don't know what faith is, because you're always fearing. If you understand the law properly, then you will see clearly and distinctly that faith is a knowing of the law of creation and abiding by that law, knowing exactly what you are doing. But when you discern the cause of the wrong movements in your mind, you can dissolve them. We must have knowledge about the self before we can transform it. The self is the intellectual and emotional side of our being. Therefore, any form of limitation is a hindrance to wholeness. We must have that intelligence to discover what is of primary importance and have the capacity to pursue it. Then if you are ignorant of the mechanism of thought, we vacillate from one to the other, keeping both the positive and the negative active. It is always double. You live in your mind. You live in your thoughts. You live in your reaction to things external to the self. Have you ever discerned in your mind then what composes your makeup? What composes the material in your mind? Have you discerned the fact whether you are reacting to things external to yourselves, or are you aware that you can think purely, that you can create? If you are caught up in everything that's external to yourselves, then your creation is according to what you think. Therefore, you are limited. But that limitation is a falsehood, has it no existing reality whatsoever. For reality is complete in itself. It is wholeness, complete. There is nothing opposing it. Nothing can oppose it, because it's wholeness and completeness. If you see this clearly, then you will understand. You will overcome these limitations, these conditions which affect the mind and body. No one can do this work but yourself. Therefore, you are not just born to suffer and decay. You are here for a purpose. The difficulty with most is that they accept the suggestions of the senses as real and lose the purpose of life, which is to give expression to wholeness, to Christ life. Now, tonight I made a remark which I think is very significant. That is to say, infinite life in itself is complete, it's impersonal in nature. It just performs the function of itself, carrying in with itself the intelligence to perform its own activity. But as we see that life itself becomes individualized and personal in the individual, you and me, what is it then that gives it this individualization? It isn't separation, because there can't be any separation in wholeness. Well, within the wholeness there is the creation of, we will call the Christ principle. Why I mean to say this is the Christ principle is said in the first book of Genesis and in John. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, yet the Word was God, and that Word was made flesh. In the wholeness was the Word, and the wholeness was in the Word, but the Word itself was the creative principle, and that was the Christ. Behind the creative principle is the totality of all life, and you will know clearly and distinctly that the life in the body is in no way separated from the totality of all life in the universe. In this state, there is a knowing, an awareness of life. Not what life is, but awareness that it is. I often get into that state of awareness, and I can know that state very well. I also can get into the state in the mind, and I also get into where the mind is doubled. I can see the movements of the mind. I can see exactly how the mind is moving, and all my thoughts and everything, because I'm accustomed to discerning them. It's the greatest privilege in the world to be able to discern your own thoughts, the own movements of the mind, so that you can understand them. Without this, there can be no clarity of mind, because there can only be a conglomeration of ideas which are completely superimposing one upon the other. Consequently, there is no cohesive thinking and no direct creativeness, but a conglomeration of activity in the ether that is causing chaos and trouble all over. A man with a mind that is alert, a consciousness that is aware. He can hold an eternal peace within himself, and by doing so can quieten thousands of people without saying a word. Why? Because he is a powerful radio station, and his thought is moving through the ether. It is bombarding the minds of all the people. They cannot resist it. It's impossible for them to resist it. They are incapable of resisting it, because it is in the ether at a terrific speed. Sight and thought have equal vibrations, and sight is a vibration of light. Light vibration travel at the rate of 186,000 miles per second, yet that thought can move through the ether, causing millions of minds to become affected by it. There is a time coming, I'm going to tell you something, a great secret that I know. The last war is a mental war, a war of minds, not a war of weapons, but a war of minds that become aware of this great and mighty secret I'm telling you, which should not be told outside this class. That is the power of the electromagnetic activity created by a strong, concentrated consciousness. And according to the power of the thought, so is the state of consciousness. Or, according to the state of consciousness, so is the power of the thought. Therefore, it is the most powerful thing, because it can interpenetrate and disintegrate matter. Do you know that a thin wire, almost invisible to your physical eye, charged with electricity, vibrating at a terrific rate, can cut through the largest tree in the world, can mow it down? It has been proved that in the electrical laboratories, experiments prove that an ordinary feather or a piece of straw charged with tremendous electrical power can twist a steel shaft as if it was a piece of string. The mind of man and the consciousness of man is still greater than that. And when the knowledge comes, they will discard all these things of bullets, of guns, of atomic weapons, because behind the mind of man is more powerful. I'm telling you a truth now. You will not see it in your lifetime, but it will come. If there are difficulties, it is no use trying to escape from them, but to face them with confidence, for this is an opportunity to assert the Christ life. Yet every sensation must be dealt with carefully and not ignorantly denied, otherwise it will rise again in the nature. Patience and understanding is the basis upon which we must act, so that the Christ can speak the word of power from within. When this is done with understanding, there will be an unfolding of the real self. Yes, when Jesus smote the fig tree because it was not bearing fruit, it was the same law that I've told you about. The law behind the power of thought. But you could not do it because, I tell you, your minds are not sufficiently clarified yet. But the time is coming, if you persevere along the lines I have shown you, your minds will become clarified to an extent that you'll be able to perform feats that will astonish you. But there is so much doubt in your mind. Don't you see? Do you understand the law of magnetizing the ether? That doubt, fear, and faith are the same. The body is for the purpose of your experiencing life in the flesh. But the flesh has no say in the matter. When the true awakening comes through understanding that which is false, the real self frees itself from conditions that surround it in the flesh. The outer is ever renewed from the inner realm by the life that is eternal. Therefore, the continuity of life is not broken when you cease to breathe in the physical. And it is not the physical body that breathes at all. It's the soul that breathes. The soul breathes through the body. The soul interpenetrates the body. Ether interpenetrates the soul. And the vibrations of light and vibrations of thought interpenetrate the ether that supports the soul and body. If you can understand that, then you will see that all power has been given into you in heaven and on earth. And Jesus knew this truth. So do the masters knew this truth. As I have been trained to be these things, naturally I'm telling you something which I have kept from you for some considerable time, because I knew that you were not yet ready for it. But the time comes as you grow in understanding. The time comes for you to understand these things. And as you go on, you will understand more and more. The wonderful thing is this, how true it is. You get a large body of people, and then you find you draw from these a certain number. From that you draw another number, till such time as you get the real essence. And I say to you, you didn't choose me, I choose you. Think about that. We make our limitations by clinging to the form. Spirit is life, and life is formless, and is the only creative power, being complete, whole. It is Christ that possesses the body of flesh. When this is understood, there is renewal of the Christ life in the body. The body has no power of its own, but it says in the beginning clearly, the Word was with God, and the Word was God, and the Word was made flesh, and the Word remains immortal. Immortal, mind you. This is faith through knowing, not a faith in someone or something apart from yourself. For when this is so, faith and fear exist side by side, and this is the faith that most people have. When this faith dies, fear takes its place, or vice versa. This is the seesaw of human existence, devoid of understanding. Without knowing, understanding, we react to things external to ourselves, so our creative power is turned in the wrong direction. So the things you do not want, but which you fear, you get. That's quite plain, isn't it? Because of the simple law of the magnetizing of the ether. That's all. There is only one rule and one law, and that law is not divided. What you think, you create, whether in fear or faith. The rain can be controlled and directed by a mind who understands. The growth of the flower and the plant can be stimulated by a mind that understands. The storms can be abated by a mind that understands. The water becomes as a rock to a mind that understands. All the feats of the masters, all the feats of Jesus, the greatest master of all time, because in the Himalayas he is considered as the greatest of all the masters of all time. And all his feats are complete and perfectly known to those who understand. But there are a lot of people in this world today, through their own ignorance, discredit them and say it could not happen. Why? Because they do not know the law of magnetizing the ether. They do not know the law of the atomic energy, which is controlled and directed by an inner force known as etherons, which are controlled and directed by the mind of man, and the consciousness being the power behind it. So, according to the conscious awareness, that state of consciousness is brought about through discernment and awareness, brings into understanding the process of these things, and we see clearly and distinctly how the Master performed his feats. But the ignorant, the credulous, will say it could not be. For them, it can never be. So don't you see how the ignorance of man prevents him from using that power at his disposal? And thank God it is so. Because if the ignorant man could use his power, he would destroy himself and many with him. But it is decreed through nature herself that only as man's consciousness unfolds, and as he discerns all that is relative, he begins to see that he can control all that is external to himself, all that is relative. And that which is creative becomes more and more conscious in his own consciousness, and he feels and knows behind him is that great and mighty reservoir of creative power known as wholeness, infinity. And all is possible unto him in heaven and on earth. I am telling you facts, but I am taking you beyond your own experiences. But unless I take you beyond your own experiences will never be anything, at least for you. Because if you depend on your own experiences, your limited experiences, and you say, through this experience, this is so, and nothing more can be done, therefore you are limited entirely by your experiences. You must go beyond your experiences into that particular plane that in itself has no experience and yet has not created any experience, but in itself is its wholeness and completeness. Man creates the experience that limits him, but in this awareness, this true awareness, and I understand it. I have fathomed this, and I know it, how true it is. Without knowing, understanding, we react to things external to ourselves, so our creative power is turned in the wrong direction, so the things you do not want, but which you fear you get. Through lack of knowing and understanding, we unconsciously use our creative power. This is probably the biggest factor for much of our unhappiness and ill health. The reason for this ignorant reaction is because most people believe and act in separation. Now, if you believe and act in separation, you are living in separation. Therefore, you are entirely and completely limited by that separation. Good God, can't you see that wholeness is everywhere? And wholeness behind is all that is creative. Wholeness alone is creative. Separation is not creative. This is disintegration. The reason for this ignorant reaction is that most people believe and act in separation. Man divorces himself from his divine inheritance because of his belief in separation. In this way, he has become impotent while the outer rules him. Can you discern in your own mind and ask yourself the question honestly and completely, does the outer rule you? I'm asking you a question which is for you to answer to yourself. But it's so important, this question, that when you have answered it to yourself, you'll be able to discern your own thinking and how you're reacting and what's taking place in yourself. Life is a spiritual force, and our birth is a spiritual fact, invisible to mortal eyes, for Christ is manifesting in the flesh. Therefore, we must abstain from worshipping idols and symbols, and know that within is the power to do all things. Unfortunately, the majority think that by repeating a formula, they have found the secret, but this is an illusion. It's the ignorant people that repeat a formula. But when the ignorant repeats a formula, there is always the opposite waiting to take its place. Immediately you stop repeating the formula. So if you want to continue, you have to keep infinitum, repeating the formula and repeating it entirely and completely ad infinitum. But whenever you stop repeating your formula, the very opposite rises up in your mind to check it, because you're ignorant of the fact. You're ignorant of the truth of this law that I am trying to show you. In the turmoil of the daily life, it is difficult for some, but it is not impossible to become conscious thinkers. For without conscious thinking, successful results cannot be obtained. Your subconscious activity is the result of your reactions, your thoughts, your emotions, that are waiting to give expression to themselves, which hang in your mind, which surround you in the ether, and waiting to take its place into your mind immediately you are vibrating at that particular rate of vibration, and flows back into you and becomes in your own consciousness, and you think then it comes from the mother source, when all the time it is something that you've reacted to long ago. These subconscious reactions into your mind must also be understood, because conscious thinking must be totally conscious and not affected by any subconscious reaction or any condition of the past, nor belief in the future, but always of the present, this present moment, life. And that is the only moment there is, present. It's this this life. And there's no other time, past or future, do not exist, or they only exist in your mind. They do not exist in reality. Wholeness knows no time, nor past, nor future, nor does it know space, because it fills all space. There is nowhere where it is not. If one is caught up in the stream of unconscious reactions in fear and anxiety, this leads away from the Christ within, who is all-powerful. Let it be quite plain that God has always been manifest in the world, and the Christ is the love of God manifest in the flesh. When we have no longer the belief in separation, we will know that God is all in all. Then our false ideas and beliefs will disappear, and the consciousness of the Christ within will manifest, making all things anew. Now you see the meaning of my words, don't you? They are just not mere words, because behind them there is a law that is definite, immutable, indestructible. It is the state of consciousness that brings about the outward manifestation in all planes, both in the inner and the outer. When we know this, we can avoid much unnecessary suffering. Those who acquaint themselves with this understanding can specify with authority, knowing that they are exercising powers bestowed upon them by the Almighty. And we will see that power being bestowed upon you by the Almighty must be the Almighty himself, because there can be no place where he is not, being omnipotent, being omnipresent, being omniscient, being all wisdom, all knowledge, being everywhere, having all power. There can be none other. That he is bestowed upon you and me, created within his own bosom, that Son, which he calls the Christ, the eternal Son of God, which is the creative principle, through which the great mighty power of the infinite begins to flow, and through the Christ all things are created. Oh, I wish I could take you inside and show you the mechanism of what is taking place. I could show you what is taking place in the heavens, about you and around you. Then you would know and understand what I am telling you. Recognition of the Almighty is not the recognition of something that is outside ourselves, for the Almighty is not a relative thing. Even to talk about the Almighty puts him in a relative position, and this is wrong. When we talk about God, we make him relative. I am talking about God now, but in our words we are making him relative. That's the only way I can convey any thought to you through word of mouth, is to speak in relative terms. But my speaking to you in the relative terms is this, is to convey to you so that you will be able to use your own consciousness to become aware, to discern all that is relative, and to become aware of your own reality. And when you become aware of your own reality, there will be silence within you, a silence so deep that you cannot speak, because immediately you speak, you create a relativeness. But in silence and completeness and wholeness, there is that which is eternal, not a relative thing. Oh, but I could make you know this, to see it and understand. Still, the time is coming when you will know it, you will find it. The answer comes to the one who seeks. But with understanding we can speak the word of power from within, knowing that the word will not return void, but will accomplish that which it is sent forth to do. If we are dependent upon an outside source, we are not using the almighty creative power from within. Therefore I say, do not depend upon any outside source whatsoever. With action comes knowledge, which is not imitative, and so it is liberating the creative power into action. It is not sitting down and thinking, but becoming active. And in that action you liberate this creative power. The pursuit of what I can do creates self-reliance. We are constantly clothing ourselves with thoughts, and the state of our consciousness determines the kind of thoughts we have. Around you are many people in sickness, misery, and want, who are followers of the present Jesus. But they have not made the great discovery of the indwelling Christ. There is no special state of learning required for one to renew the body and soul. The laws of nature, mental and spiritual and physical, will serve us in exact proportion that we understand and observe them. As you progress in your own consciousness, you will find coming into your consciousness an awareness of this relative world, an awareness of the mechanism behind the activity of this world, an awareness of that which is creative within you. Naturally then, how does that come into your own consciousness? Because it is in your consciousness. God must be conscious of everything in the universe. His consciousness must envelop everything. And that consciousness, being wholeness, must be in everything. Therefore, that consciousness which is wholeness must be in me and you. Naturally then, the consciousness will reveal its own contents as it unfolds. How do I get this information? Do you think I write it from books or get it anywhere? My dear students, I very seldom read books. People present me with books one after another, but I put them aside. But when I read them, I see that they're all relative. They are delving in the relative world, things external to themselves, not something that will make you think, so that you can reach that which is an unfathomable, unknowable. It is only when you have reached that which is unknowable, then you will be meek and mild. The meek shall covet the air. The meek shall have power, because only through this humility, which is not a negative humility, but a humility that comes when you become aware of the unknowable. Do not believe the one who says he knows, because you will sure he does not know. There is a knowing, and that knowing is all that is required, a knowing of the unknowable. For as your consciousness unfolds, so that consciousness of yours will still be unknowable, but it will be expanding and revealing what is within itself, all the relative world, the relative universe, even the archangels in heaven. They reveal a greater expression of the light, but still they cannot pierce that unknowable. Yet they're giving expression to that unknowable, but they do not know what the unknowable is. We only know that love is the secret. Do unto others as you would have them do unto you. It is not a mere command, but the law of divine protection. When the prophet said, an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth, he did not mean that we must apply the law ourselves, but meant that the law of balance will extract the exact proportion as we deal out to others. Nature forces us into a corner where we are forced to use our laws with intelligence and understanding. And you will find that you and everyone else is forced into a corner until such time you use with intelligence and understanding the laws of nature. The universe is proved to be made up of a substance exact in nature to that which makes up ourselves. Therefore, the created and the Creator are one, and where no separation is possible. With this understanding, we can dominate any circumstance instead of becoming its victim, and this can be done only by intelligently cooperating with the creative power which is always aiming at our betterment. Most people do not realize the importance of this fact. Otherwise, they would accomplish things consciously which would never be attained through mere human effort. We must have confidence in the all-creative power in which we live and which lives in us. Know ye not I am in the Father, and the Father is in me? We must make ourselves independent of other people's efforts on our behalf. Dependence on others has been the cause of much unhappiness and disappointment, and has brought distrust and failure into many lives. We must work from the center outwards, not from out in. Whatever I see the Father do, I do likewise. Can you understand the meaning now of these words? How potent they are? Don't you see, as your consciousness expands, these words become more real to you. At one time, they were just a platitude. When you came here first, and you joined these classes, these words were platitudes. They didn't mean very much to you, but now they do mean something which is much more. And as your consciousness unfolds, they will mean more and more still, into infinity. There is no ceasing of this. No, no. This means we no longer wait for others to act for us, but become creative, cooperating with the all creative life. If you are dominated by example or follow a pattern or recognize the only authority as being that of something that happened previously or limited by existing facts, you will never be really creative. You must transcend the experiences of the past and enter into the ever-present, the realm where others fear to tread. Then you are automatically endowed with unlimited resources. Remember, we cannot use the law unless we apply it. The true sower is one who knows himself. Then his faith increases. For there is no difference in the law that operates in the ear of corn and the law that operates in man's consciousness. Aware of the one creative law, yet most people have failed to see this truth. Plant a seed in the ground, provided it is not interfered with in any way, it is sure to grow. Same as you do plant a seed in the mind. the infinite mind. You can't plant it outside the infinite mind because there is no outside the infinite mind. You can only plant a thought, a seed in the infinite mind. You can't plant it outside it. Therefore, it must be fed and nourished by the infinity. It can't be fed by any other thing. It's impossible. A well-ordered individual is one who intelligently directs his thoughts and efforts in accordance with these laws. Therefore, a well-ordered society rises out of individuals who understand. With no knowledge of these laws, we unconsciously allow ourselves to be destroyed because we allow ourselves to be controlled by leaders with little knowledge of the compensations of the creative law. But everything returns from whence it came. Material and forms grow up. Their growth complete. Then the disintegration of the form takes place. But the life within is the same. It goes on to even greater and greater expansion of itself in the inner planes and inner worlds. So the substance that you see, this table, this body, your bodies, will all pass back into the ether substance of which it arose, created through the law of electromagnetic principle of which your bodies have been brought into existence, and shall also, after it is completed, there will be a recoiling or uncoiling into the nucleus of the atom itself, and then it lies dormant. One day, then some other force will come into that nucleus and will grow again with greater expansion, gathering to itself other atoms, surrounding itself from the ether, and building up greater forms of greater experience. Because all experience is existing. So tiny is an atom. Yet the real atom of your body has contained within itself all your experiences and will remain dormant. But it will remain in the ether, waiting for some other time to enter into a body, carrying with it these great experiences through, being born again to that body, and then expanding itself with greater experience. Again, that same experience will be uncoiled, again in that atom, which will remain in its own nucleus, waiting again to come into operation. So is nature. So is the universe. And all the atoms within their own nucleus will grow in intensity until such time as all experience of the universe in itself remains whole, its completeness in the atom itself, that is not separated from God in any way, but is God himself. When man's mind is focused less upon the created and more upon the Creator, he will not be dominated by circumstances and things. For is it not the craving for things that all the trouble is about in the world today? Man has enslaved himself by allowing the effects to determine his state of mind, and thus he is controlled by the effects of his own cause. Only when man feels the thrill that comes from the self-confidence arising out from his realization of his true relationship to the Creator of all things will he free himself from himself. Man can never be really useful to his brother until he has gained this freedom. Freedom must come. Do not think that by giving up the little things in life that you will succeed. Little things do not matter very much. We must see the great vision. So many people are blinded by small, petty things that people do. If you understand yourself, you will understand why they act in that way. Only little people are taken up with little things. Do not waste your time and life in trying to combat them. When the big vision comes, these things fall away and disappear into nothingness where they belong. Therefore, the great vision absorbs all the little things. Like a one great emotion sweeps into one all the small little whirlpools of emotions in your organism and your body into one complete emotion. They are passed away. They'll be transmuted through the realization of that which I have told. But your mind must be cleansed first through discerning. Oh, could I make you understand that the discernment of your mind and the conditions of your thought and the creations of your own selves, that is so essential before you can understand what I'm talking about. Therefore, the sooner you start, the better. We must not separate heaven from earth, but bring the kingdom of heaven to earth. So cast out your false beliefs, your beliefs in sickness, beliefs in the cause of fear, belief in the power of sin, belief in the false prophets who preach sin, devil, and hell. Instead, lift your eyes to the sky, and as the sun rises, you will see all the stars disappear. They will give way and go into the background. So with us, when we realize the truth of our being, all these things dissolve away with the personal self, with all its prejudices and possessiveness. Then we shall be like him who made us in his own likeness. Benediction. Almighty One, thou art not separate, but one with me eternally. In thee there is no evil, for the devil cannot exist in thy omnipresence. It was the king of illusion who sat on the throne of ignorance, was the cause of ill health, unhappiness, and my soul blindness. It was in my deepest moment of despair that I heard thy voice calling, "Be not afraid, for I am with thee always." Then the light that shone from the beginning of time blotted out all the darkness in my mind. Now I see with clear sight all that hinders thy expression. I thank thee, Almighty One, that thy light becomes mine forevermore.